unpredicted rain patterns, excessive heat, floods, among other catastrophic events have been happening in the country but across the globe as well. Joining me to discuss the alarming effects of climate change, a student's perspective, is a panel of very interesting young ladies and gentlemen who will help us put perspective to the conversation and give context to it, but also make us understand the alarming issue that looms around climate change. So in no particular order, I'll just let my panel say hello, introduce themselves, then we shall dive straight into the conversation. I'll begin from my immediate right to my extreme right, and then we shall get into the conversation. You're most welcome.
Okay, thank you so much, Drake. My name is Daphine Kuhirwa. I'm a UCU student, and I'm glad to be part of this panel to discuss an interesting topic, but also a topic that really affects each and every other person in the world, and that's climate change.
Thank you. Looking forward to having an interesting conversation with you.
Thank you.
Today, I only have one gentleman on the show. You're most welcome.
Thank you so much, Drake. I'm obliged one more time to be in this panel. My name is Ejoyat Tristan. I'm a finalist at Makerere University and the Students Representative President in Makerere University. I'm so excited to have this discussion.
Thank you. Looking forward to having a thrilling conversation with each other. Yes, Lawino.
Yes, Lawino Vanessa. I'm from Uganda Martyrs University. I am excited to discuss a very passionate topic of mine, climate change, and I look forward to having a fruitful discussion.
Thank you. All right, so usually when there is a couple of gentlemen and one lady, I start with the lady. And there's a saying that obviously ladies first, but today I think to be prudent, since we only have a gentleman as a panelist on the show, I'll start with him. So Joel, without prejudice, definitely. The conversation tonight is one that is very interesting, and one that very many young people have taken very keen interest in talking about, but also trying to drive impact and trying to have the whole world, trying to have our countries and communities involved. The conversation around climate change. It affects the old, it affects the young, it affects everyone, irrespective of race, color, gender. And today we are discussing the effects of climate change. But let me just bring it down to our country, Uganda. We have experienced unpredicted rain patterns around mid-year, around the months of April to around August. The heat was enormous. We saw the heat wave rising above the normal heat that we receive. And that has sparked conversations around, which then brings us to this particular topic, the alarming effects of climate change. Give us context to the conversation from that background.
Thank you so much, Jeff, once more time. I'm so obliged again to be in this discussion, and today unpacking the integrities about climate change and the effects. I'm not going to actually fly or go beyond this country of ours, Uganda, because today the role I'm playing being an environmental activist, I'll actually start with my own vicinity, and that is Uganda. So understanding or putting into perspective the dire consequences of climate change, it is very imperative to first understand what are the key proponents of climate change. Now, looking at Uganda at its best, we're going to start from the structural and go down to the last person down who is experiencing the aftermath of climate change. Uganda that has been having seasonal and day in, day out kind of drastic change of climate. Recently, we know what happened in Karamoja. And then the other time we're in the east, we know what was happening in Bududa sub-region. We are so much multifaceted with what happens in the Rwenzori mountain, whereby we have the melting of glaciers and so on. So getting into the gist of the matter today, climate change has come out to actually be one, if not the most important discussion that should have taken the national, if not the global eye. So as far as understanding this whole discussion is what is concerned. So when we get into this discussion, there are things we're supposed to look at. I'll first side into the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals that was put into place before we try to understand how to alleviate poverty in this nation. The Sustainable Development Goals talks about the first proponent being zero hunger, eliminating poverty and so on. He noticed that climate change goes up to is Sustainable Development Goal number 13. That's actually talking about priorities. It shows how climate has been neglected. Maybe that is not enough. I'll take you to our country's budget. The country's budget allocation that is recommended to be 5% of the country's annual budget. You realize that in the recent years, our budget has been decreasing. I'll take you back in 2020 and 2021. You notice that Uganda's expenditure, like on climate change, contributes to 0.2 gross. Like the GDP of this country, it contributes like 0.2%. Yeah, and understanding that, you notice that the budget allocation for this whole idea is 0.2%. Now, in 2022, 2023, it actually decreased to 0.1%, a decrease of 0.9. Now, in the subsequent years, as an average budget allocation of Uganda's an average budget allocation of Uganda's program as far as climate change is concerned, you notice that an average is just 2%, as opposed to the 5% that is supposed to be. So if we're discussing issues to do with disaster preparedness, whereby the outcome of climate change, we are going to talk about the temperature rising, we are going to talk about floods, we are going to talk about, this actually drops down to people dying. We're going to talk about, it affects the enclave of the population, that's the vulnerable groups. Talk about the children and the women disproportionately, in a sense, because realize that as a result of climate change, there will be displacement. People are going to be displaced. But you've noticed that if at all the government had put this as the first priority, yeah, making climate change the first priority, you notice that we would have actually found a way of coping up with this change. Because if there is something that we're not supposed to be prepared for, is change, because it is the only sure thing that is yet to happen. We always expect change to be into play. So having climate as the first go on into play is that we're supposed to prepare for climate every single time, because looking at how we prepare for climate change as a country is not realistic. Because if you're going to wait for people to experience what happened in Bududa during the mudslides and the landslides, you realize that it was at the aftermath of the landslides. People had lost their lives and property. It is when the government came in and they're now saying we're going to displace people. This place it is prone to landslides and so on. But it would have been done prior, take an assessment, and let people get out of this place, because you realize that according to Uganda's constitution, Article 247 actually shows that the government is the trustee of the country's natural resources, including the atmosphere. So it is the responsibility of the government to delve into the matters affecting its citizens.
All right, now thank you. That's a very robust context that you give us from an angle of disaster response, but also trying to show the idea of catastrophic events that has been happening across the country. So that is the angle that we shall take the debate on your end. But let me get to you, Daphine, before I come to you, Vanessa. How would you contextualize this particular conversation?
Okay, thank you so much, Drake. To begin with, about 86% of the world's population are ready to fight climate change and do what it takes. But where the fault comes in is in the how aspect. How are they supposed to do it? And how effective is it going to be? So now, bearing in mind that climate is the most paramount, all the other activities that get to happen, all the other innovations and the diversification will definitely start with the climate. Yeah. If the climate is tampered with and in a negative way, like we are seeing time per time, it is going to definitely affect all the other activities of mankind. So that is why I feel like climate should be prioritized at all levels. And people are reading, even the youth are reading, but we do not know what we are supposed to do. What we are supposed to do and is known to all of us is in theory. And now people need to make things practical. If you are saying that this should be done, then how should it be done and how practical or for how long is it going to be done? Secondly, climate has really been tampered with in very many ways. For example, the Chitenzi incident that happened. And just like Joel was saying, government came in to help when people had already lost lives and property. And that is our problem. Weather forecasting should be maintained and it should be prioritized, where people know this is going to happen and at this particular time. Therefore, if displacement of people and whatever not is going to take place or should take place, then it should happen earlier on before people are more affected. Because at the end of the day, even more money is going to be invested. So what's going to happen is that the government is going to give this individual that has lost his house and property 20 million. And what is going to happen is that it is going to strike a certain level of excitement in them, and that money is going to spend, boom, in no time, they don't know where the money went. And they don't have where to go. So it is going to affect them in the long run, because development and livelihood really goes step by step. So these things should be planned prior, and people know what they're supposed to do and how they're supposed to live.
Right.
Yeah.
Interesting. Your argument correlates with what Joel is trying to argue, that we're looking at disaster response having a huge question mark. And you raise an issue to do with priorities in this country, an angle that I think I'll ask the question, if at all the government is not then prioritizing, then what can we do differently to see to it that we have mitigation measures and we get to have possibly more disaster ready when the time comes. But thanks for that quick context to the conversation, and I'll see the angle that you're trying to take the debate. Vanessa.
Yes, thank you for that. Climate change, first of all, I feel like is taken for granted, because if you ask a student like me, if like 2 in 10 students don't even know what climate change is. It's not factual, I'm just assuming, but yesterday I had a conversation with a colleague of mine, and I asked them, do you know climate change is affecting us? And they told me, what is climate change? You people are just lobbying for money and stuff like that. So I feel the first thing that should be addressed in terms of climate change is the literacy. Because if you're telling people to address climate change and they don't even know exactly what it is, then that's a challenge. So after us understanding the depth of what climate change is and what it comes with, then we shall understand its effects. Climate change has a lot of effects, and it comes from a lot of things. For example, as she said, the Chitenzi landfill disaster that happened recently, it's because of waste pollution. Waste pollution is a very big issue in this country, and it's not being addressed. Yes, KCCA is coming in and addressing it, but not exactly to the levels it's supposed to be addressed at. So, and if you tell a common layman, a common man in the common man language, that no, you shouldn't dump caveras and you shouldn't pollute, it will affect the climate. They won't know what that means. So, yes, there is that aspect. And also, climate change affects all the diversities of the economy, the health, the food sector. Every sector is affected by climate change. There is food insecurity, there is health. In terms of health, it actually also affects mental health, and mental health is actually an underlooked aspect of climate change. People don't know climate change actually affects mental health, which is eco-anxiety. And also people face trauma, people face stress because of like floods, droughts. Those people that go through that, they undergo trauma, they undergo stress. Yes, so in my perspective, I feel like climate knowledge, climate literacy should be the first issue we should distress and we should put out there in order for these climate change effects to reduce.
All right, let me just stick with you now, and we now get into the gist of the conversation, highlighting that climate literacy among students, if I quote you right, 2 in 10 students are aware of climate change. That means if you put 10 of us in a room only 2 students know what climate change is and know the effects of climate change. Now, if you are to multiply that with the various students, the numerous students we have in this country, that means a plethora of students are not aware of what climate change is, and that is a disaster. Now, understanding that context and now putting it to, first of all, before even go into the effects, there's already a problem in that there is lack of climate literacy or climate knowledge. So first question, what can the students such as yourselves who are aware of the effects of climate change do differently to help inform the students who are not aware of climate change? But then 2, how can we stress the effects of climate change more succinct but also in an interesting manner?
Okay, so we can stress, I'll start with the second question. We can stress the effects by giving real life examples. Like, for example, last year in November, there was Insanity, but we didn't realize Insanity. Actually, it wasn't there. So people were asking, what happened? Where is the Insanity? So I don't know if this year we are going to experience the same thing, but people don't know that that's also part of climate change. Another example, the heavy rainfall patterns, and they are unpredictable. So as we are going to class, normally for my case, we would have a scenario where we are going to class and there's heavy rainfall, too much rainfall, and we don't expect this, so some of us don't prepare for this, and this affects our day-to-day lives. Yes, so that can also be a real-life example. Some people are suffering from drought. Some schools, some different universities are in areas where there's a lot of drought. There's also heat waves. Heat waves is a very common example of climate change because we face it.
Yeah, I think on that point of heat wave, we saw a few months back schools in Sudan actually closed.
Yes. Yeah.
Because of the excessive heat that students were experiencing. So that just shows you how alarming the situation is, and that definitely makes a very good point. Let me just bring in Joel, then I come to Daphine. Joel, Vanessa highlights very key issues. One, first of all, that there's lack of knowledge in climate change. But besides the lack of knowledge among the students, but generally across board, she stresses that we need to find ways on making the conversation of climate change, first of all, appealing to the young people who are experiencing these effects, but then we also need to find ways of making people understand that simple events, such as the decrease in numbers of grasshoppers, or what is commonly known as insanity, or the excessive heat, all those are devastating effects of climate change. Now, the argument that you earlier raised on relation to the government on issue of disaster response, before we even get government in place, I understand everyone has a role to play when it comes to climate change. What are the roles, or what roles can students engage in to, first of all, foster a more resilient efforts towards the fight in climate change?
Thank you so much, Drake. It's very important to first get into the outcome of the key stakeholders in the community as far as the fight against environmental conservation is concerned. Because I would take you back in 2009, whereby the government banned the use of polythene bags. And then in the subsequent years, around 2019, that's when an Act of Environment came in requiring the Uganda National Bureau of Standards to actually implement the idea of not using the polythene bags. Now, in 2021, the head of state comes in and tells people, actually he lifts the ban and reinstates it, saying that there were no real, not knowing which grounds he used to actually reinstate the ban, because understanding the consequences of using polythene bags, it is very alarming, because these are products that have carcinogenic components that contribute to cancer. Yeah. So if a head of state comes in and eliminates such a ban, then it kills the fight, because, like you said, everyone has a role to play as far as the environmental change is concerned. But then if that has been like the ban that would have been very important into fighting this climate change has been eliminated, then let's trickle down to the last person down. Because this thing involves the technocrats who are supposed to look at the effects of different things that people are using in the society. Now, if at all the technocrats could not have the grounds to inform the head of state that, look, wait a minute, the polythene bags that you are reinstating have actually very catastrophic results as far as using them are concerned. Maybe, what about the idea of getting the options apart from using the polythene bags? But coming in and just reinstating the ban, I would say it's a miscalculated idea. So coming down to the people, it is very important to also understand the idea of diversity, yeah? Because we are talking about climate does not only make us think about the high temperature, but this is something, I'll first take you like in the Arctic ice, when they melt, you realize it doesn't only cause the filling of the sea level, no. It actually brings about the ancient germs that cause different diseases into fluctuation. That's why you realize there are some kind of germs that are going to come due to the melting of the ice in the Arctic region.
And that affects the biodiversity.
The biodiversity.
Which means what we eat definitely is also infected.
You get. So you realize that talking about the climate change, we cannot talk about climate change and we annihilate talking about agriculture, which is the key, if not the anchor of this state of a nation, whereby agriculture is what most of the livelihood of this country depend on. So if at all there is climate change that's going to come out with unpredictable seasons, yeah, the rain patterns that are going to affect the crop yields in the long run, this is a vulnerable sector that is going to suffer the dire consequences of the climate change. So if at all we don't get in hands-on and go and do the kind of sensitization away from this forming of policies, you heard about the NCD. There were so many other policies that were formed, but you realize in a small time frame, you realize that these policies were not realistic. There are no achievements that can actually address the consequences of the climate change. So realize it is very important to go down to the stakeholders, because we need technocrats to actually inform the local government, inform the people of what products are we supposed to use as far as protecting and preserving the climate is concerned.
All right, Daphine, the conversation is taking us to understanding the effects, but also the role everyone plays in us trying to combat climate change. But right now I'm interested in, first of all, in making people understand that these effects of climate change are actually here with us. Take us through events in this country that has, first of all, affected people, killed people. But besides taking us through those events, what are those consequences of such events in terms of economically speaking? For example, when we do not have when we have unpredictable rain patterns, that means crop yields are affected, and that means we shall either experience food shortages, and that means when we experience food shortages, some people die of hunger. That means children do not get what to eat, but also people who are in business or the economy is greatly affected. Take us away.
Okay, thank you so much, Drake. I actually thought you would ask me to talk about what should be done, but sure. So there are very many instances, just like I said, in one way or the other, directly or indirectly, either long term or short term, we are all affected by climate change. So to begin with, in Karamoja sub-region, which is actually a semi-arid, since I was born, actually, I've always heard about the different climate change and how these people are affected, and up to now they are still affected. So currently they've gone through food shortage. That only means they are dying. There's like stagnant growth, even in their businesses, if they have. And then that means there's delay in productivity. Everything is affected. And this could be solved. Now, bearing in mind that naturally the people of Karamojong sub-region find more interest in nomadic pastoralism or grazing. But also, the government could interest these people in agriculture because they are practically not going to rely only on rearing animals because they clearly need to grow crops. So what is going to happen?
But Daphine, this is an area, as you said, it's already a dry area.
Yes.
So how would you interest people in farming yet?
Yes,
historically,
I'm getting there.
Yes.
Yes, I'm getting there. Now, bearing in mind that it is semi-arid, what the government is going to do is to do irrigation in these areas, which is possible.
Okay.
Yeah, so if they irrigate the area and allow people, even if it's small scale, with time it is going to grow. It is an investment that the government needs to appreciate and know that it is actually not something they should wait to do later, but it is urgent. So when they irrigate the areas and these people get to appreciate crop growing, they are going to survive. Also, there's going to be diversification because clearly they only depend on animals, which animals sometimes, even the grass dries up. Even the animals don't have what to eat. So that only means even the animals that is their only hope is going to die. So if the government interests these people in agriculture by supporting them with irrigation or any other ways possible, then we would see the region grow. Now, secondly is the Chitenzi example. Even when I was coming here from Mokono, I was seeing rubbish everywhere. And since it is even a rainy day, it's worse. It is rubbish in mud on the streets of Kampala. So, however much KCCA has appreciated this and it's trying to do what it can do, but it is not to their level best. Yeah. So if they come up and, because what is going to happen is that the same way that Chitenzi people were affected, even the Mokono people will be affected, even the Kampala people will be affected. And that is what brings up us back to disaster preparedness, right? So if KCCA and the entire government and local leaders get to appreciate this problem and then rubbish is swayed away and deposited where it is supposed to be, probably we would not have that problem again. But even when it has come, people have not learned and they are still throwing rubbish wherever they want. Also is the example
let's just stay on that point of, first of all, people dumping whichever way without even caring.
Yes.
The same law that you talked about that we enacted in the year, we came up with in the year 2007, a year later we saw Rwanda doing the same. And if you are to juxtapose Rwanda and Uganda, Rwanda today is a more cleaner state than Uganda. In your argument, when you started your submission, you talked about lack of prioritization by the government. And that goes down to all various government agencies such as KCCA. But besides the lack of prioritization, we go down to the individuals. Individuals, you find someone who eats something, either in a taxi, in their car, just open the window, dumps. The mindset is what I'm interested in, mindset. Even when we go ahead and KCCA cleans the city and all, if people are still dumping, definitely there's still going to be, a rubbish around and it will still affect the environment. We know that caveras are non-biodegradable and it takes approximately or averagely 400 years to decay.
Okay, you will agree with me when I say that something that you got to since childhood is going to stick than something you're trying to appreciate in your adulthood. So clearly in Uganda previously, when we were growing up, it is okay for you to open the window of a taxi and throw a bottle of soda. No one is going to hold you accountable. So what is going to happen is that we should interest these young people. So however much the situation is bad, because that is what you've grown up seeing, in one way or the other, however much we try, there is that relaxation that comes with it. But also, I think, I don't know who is responsible, either the government or whoever, but they should be strict on these people. Because however much we talk about recycling and how it should be appreciated, 51 million tons of plastics are made per year, but only 2.4 get to be recycled. That means the other goes to the soil, and that is how everything is getting to be the way it is now. Yes. So things like recycling should be more appreciated, but also get to interest at least the young people, so that when they are growing up, they know it is not right and it shouldn't be done. So because the situation is bad, we shouldn't worsen it. At least let us rise up as the youth from where we are now and try to pick up the situation and be better. Because I really don't think that it would cost anyone a lot to really dispose of their rubbish well. It doesn't. It doesn't even need a lot of energy. But because of the mindset and knowing that even if I dump it here, no one is going to do anything. Yeah.
And I think it links back to to what she's talked about, climate literacy. That the fact that people aren't aware or have the knowledge of their actions, they will definitely act the way they are.
Well, I beg to disagree. I feel like people are aware, but they don't care.
Really?
Yes.
If at all you have, as you said, 2 out of 10 actually understand the concept of climate change. If you pick 2 people out of the 10, they will tell you, obviously, if I dumped a bottle of Coca-Cola on this particular piece of land, it will take a couple of years to what? To decompose. If you pick someone who is completely unaware even of the conversation around climate change, they are not I don't know how to term it, but they do not have that sense of the environment that they know if I dump this on this particular place, it won't decompose, or it will take this number of years to decompose. Now,
Okay.
That's what I'm saying. It links back to that argument of climate literacy.
Yes, that is also there where people actually genuinely don't know the effects of these things.
And there are very many.
And there are very many, and where it is going to get us to. But now the problem comes in where even the people that already know, even the people that are aware, are still doing the same because they literally do not care.
True. Definitely. That's all right. Vanessa, understanding all that, let's just try and put a bigger spectrum to this conversation and look at it from the vulnerable perspective. In the year 2022, a report was conducted and showed that 62 million Africans were greatly affected by climate change. And out of that, 4% of that population are from the sub-Saharan Africa, and Uganda falls under the sub-Saharan Africa. And alive to the fact that if 4% fall under sub-Saharan Africa, there is definitely, that means we are greatly affected, and sub-Saharan Africa is the poor part of the continent. Obviously, you know, 41%, according to UBOS, 41% of Ugandans live below the poverty line, and that means we do not have the capacity to adapt to the effects of climate change even when we are greatly affected with a disaster such as floods, or even drought, or even landslides. Now, that being the case, there are 4 categories of vulnerable groups when it comes to climate change. And those vulnerable groups includes women, children, youth, and persons with disabilities. Now, when you look at the categorization of the most affected, you get that women are the most affected in that. And our country has very many women in the bracket of women and youth who are affected by climate change. Now, from the angle of an activist, but also a student and someone who is passionate about the conversation of climate change, I would like us to understand how climate change greatly affects that vulnerable group of women and youth from the angle, and what exactly can be done differently to help elevate the vulnerable group that we've just cited.
Okay, so women are mostly affected by climate change because women are the root of a household. That's the first thing. And when climate change is to affect, it affects starting from the first person down there. So women, mostly in rural areas, are in charge of fetching water, getting food for the household, and climate change, as we have seen, affects all the sectors: food, water, everything. So when climate change affects the environment, it causes food insecurity, water shortage. This woman is going to be tasked to walk miles and miles to look for water. She talked about Karamoja. Karamoja is semi-arid. So the women are tasked to look for water from miles and miles away, and that affects them. And also climate change leads to domestic violence. So a man is going to come back to the household, there's no food, there's no water. He's going to put his stress on the woman, and he's going to beat the woman. Where's the food, where's the water? And that also greatly affects women as well. Then, yes, the women, children, youth. Us as youth, we are in charge of the future generation. It's us who are going forward with our environment, with our planet. So the things we are doing now are going to affect us. It's us who are in charge of what's going to happen in the future. So it's us who are going to face intense drought, heat waves, climate-induced effects as well. So then the people with disabilities normally don't have access to a lot of things like access to finance that can enable them to address and adapt to the effects of climate change, as well as women and youth. Because women are less able to access finance than men. And 28% of women own land. I'm linking land to climate change because women, when they access land, they're able to do certain things with the land that men are not, that men cannot do, like planting trees. A woman will plant trees. A woman will.
But the men were planting trees.
Yes, they are there. But a woman will take. I don't know how to bring it to the perspective of climate change, but the woman will use this land because she's the one in charge of bringing food. And this food can be able to, I don't know how to bring it into that perspective, but yes, there are certain things a woman will do with the land that a man cannot. And also land can give access to finance, because if you go to a bank and you want a loan, per se, you can say, I want a loan, and then you give the land ownership. And in that case, when the woman gets access to finance, she's able to adapt to these climate effects, like, let me say, be able to settle somewhere where the climate is not disturbing, or be able to adapt. So yes, in my perspective, that's...
Something that has piqued my interest is settled in an area that has less effects of climate change. Joe, have you heard of a term called climate migration?
Climate migration, however.
Climate migration is simply the idea that because, let's say, let me use it, Bududa, an area that has, ever since when we were young, we have been seeing landslides happening in the eastern part of Uganda in Bugishu, where people are greatly affected by landslides. There are families that have moved from Bududa and maybe relocated to somewhere else. That's migration. Migration that is induced due to the effects of climate change, which are events happening because of disasters that are from the environment. Case in point, and another example, maybe not more international, we have seen developed countries, what just happened recently in Valencia, in Spain, where the storm and all, and there are families that have moved from that one point to another, that have migrated because of the effects of climate change. And we have had various examples from our communities. We see people who move from point A to point B because their lands are no longer tillable or even produce the foods that they need. All that happens due to climate migration. And there is also what they call as climate refugees. Now, climate refugees are people who move, let's say, from one country to another due to negatively induced effects of climate change. Floods, landslides, earthquakes, among others. You're forced to move into another country to seek refuge on grounds of climate. Now, understanding that concept and trying to put into perspective climate migration, climate refugees to our conversation, and making our audience understand that we have climate change is not about seeing floods, seeing this, seeing that, but you will, at one point A, you'll be forced to move away from your place to another place because your land is no longer tillable, you're experiencing heavy rainfalls, among others. So now the conversation is, how best can young people help mitigate the situation to prevent the climate migration and prevent being forced to become climate refugees?
Thank you so much, Drake. Once President Obama said, it is our generation that is the first to experience climate change. and should be this generation to be the last to fight it. Meaning, we should actually embrace sustainable development growth, whereby we embrace the development without jeopardizing the rights of the future generation. That's why I would say, if we are supposed to test, the ultimate test of our conscience would be our ability to sacrifice something today for the future generation that are not going, whose thank you statements will not be heard. In a sense, what I'm trying to actually put, and I'm trying to put into perspective is, we ought to do things, if we're supposed to do things to do with development, we're supposed to do things that propel development, but without abusing the environment. Because if you look at the whole spectrum of development, lately you heard about the displacement of people from Lubigi. You realize that lately there's what is called the impact assessment before putting up a power plant, putting up an industry, and so on. But looking at the constitution amendments that has been put in regard, you realize that it is only a prerequisite to open up what? A power plant. It is not actually the impact assessment that looks at the effects, the long-term effects of the power plant or the industry to the environment. So someone just does an impact assessment and comes to the paper, and as a prerequisite is given a place, and he opens up the what? Opens up the industry and so on. But you realize that in the long run, the aftermath of the industry has dire consequences to the general environment, whereby we're going to have emissions, we are going to have poor disposal of poisonous industrial wastes. In the long sense, it's going to affect the biodiversity. Now, I'll take you back to the latest statement that was brought by Wildlife Authority and Forestry, whereby they said Uganda loses 100,000 hectares of land every single year due to what? Due to land alienation. And you realize that every year people are occupying the what? Occupying these lands, the wetlands, which are very important. But the consequence, they are very important for the development of the environment and preservation. But they are so detrimental in a sense that as we take these places, we assume residents of these places that have been left for the betterment of the environment. It comes out that that's when you have the rain patterns and so on. But I would put it in a sense that it's because of the population growth. Every day, like over decades, the last decade, you notice that Uganda's population has doubled, if not tripled, because people are producing every day. In a sense, it brings about the scramble for scarce resources. This includes land and so on. So it is very important to sensitize the entire public and this generation that we cannot produce the 12, the 24, the 8, and so on children the way our ancestral fathers and grandfathers did, because of the scarcity of what? Of resources, and in the same sense, protection of the environment. Because when a poor man gets, the only part of a poor man to get excited is when he gets intimate with a woman and they produce. And that is their only what? Their only point of excitement and happiness. But they should be taught to annihilate that whole idea and understand that the more the population grows, the dire the consequence in the environment.
Perfect. Just as you have put it, Daphine, Joel, Daphine, just wanted to pick up and help us understand, how can we strike a balance between economic development and environmental protection? Because with the increasing need of the growth in population, as Joel put, that means there should be more need to set up industries to accommodate people in terms of providing job opportunities, economic growth for the economy, among others. But also there is conversation that even when there is a population growth, you're setting up industries, those industries will still pollute the environment. So environmentalists say, no, we need to halt. For example, you saw activists who are against the exploration and exploitation of oil in the Tilenga region with chants such as Stop ECOP. So how can we strike a balance between economic development and environmental protection?
Okay, to begin with, 70% or even more than 70% of Uganda's population, Uganda's economy is from agriculture. That only means that climate in and of itself shouldn't be a limiting factor to economic growth, but rather climate should boost economic growth. So what happens is that there is a misconception, or there are misconceptions, and climate is not appreciated but rather abused. So that is where we cannot use climate to attain economic growth, yet that should be the case. So however much industrialization should be put in place, that is good, that is okay. But the same way they come up with those industries is the same way that we should come up with mitigating factors to pollution and whatnot. So industries in and of themselves shouldn't be a problem, because clearly they bring job opportunities, they make work easier and all that. So now the small problem is with the pollution and whatnot, which I feel like should be appreciated and solved. The same knowledge that we use to come up with these industries and whatever they do is the same way we should now convert that energy into meaningfully or using these industries in a more profitable way. But also they are renewable sources of energy, which should be appreciated, because the same way you're going to cut down a tree for firewood or charcoal is the same way you would buy a solar panel.
But on that point of a solar panel, I clearly put to you that 41% of Ugandans are poor people. Renewable energy that you're arguing for is something that maybe a few privileged youth such as yourself and your families can be in position to access them. So the greater majority of Ugandans and the greater majority of Africans may not get it. So how practical is that?
I saw that coming.
Yeah.
So now, however much renewable energy is on the surface, or seemingly expensive.
No, it's actually the best option.
No. Yeah, it's the best option, but however much people might want to downplay it because it is seemingly expensive. So I'd like to inform you, Drake, and whoever is watching, that expensive things are actually not expensive things. but no, listen.
You are about to give us a Maria Antoinette. All right.
I'm trying to get the right words to use. Because however much you say that cutting down a tree for firewood and you get into deforestation is not expensive, it's actually not. Because the long-term effect is what is more expensive.
And that's the conversation. The fact that people do not understand the long-term effect makes it very hard to strike a balance. And the fact that they also have access to those trees.
Then they should cut them. Yes, I get where you're coming from. I really get where you're coming from.
Yeah, but...
so what we should do, first of all, is appreciate the problem that we have at hand, rather than self-pity and thinking that we actually cannot. Because the more we think we cannot afford a solar panel, but now go on the streets and take alcohol all day, all night, and other things that are going to consume money. How much is a solar panel, the smallest solar panel?
But that's not enough. Anyway, let's just quickly go for a short break. We shall come back. Please stay with us. We shall just quickly go for a short break, then we'll come back and begin the conversation. Stay with us.
Digital rights are those human rights and legal rights that allow individuals to access, use, create and publish digital media, or to access and use computers, other electronic devices and telecommunication networks. Digital rights include a right to freedom of expression, information and communication through technology, a right to privacy and data protection, a right to credit for personal works, a right to universal and equal digital access, a right to identity, a right to anonymity, a right to be forgotten, and a right for protection of minors, among others. The state's digital rights are frequently violated through various unfair actions, for example, blockage of websites and social networks, theft of credentials, unauthorized use of people's data for personal gain, privacy intrusion, online censorship, arrests and intimidation of online users, internet blockages, and the proliferation of laws and regulations that undermine the potential of technology to drive social, economic, and political development worldwide. It is hence every citizen's responsibility to respect rights of other digital users and to speak out or report to the responsible parties when one's rights are violated.
Welcome back from that break. Just before we went into the break, Daphine was making a very interesting and controversial statement that at least that Ugandans can be in position to buy solar, and her argument is her argument is, let's go with your argument, that the smallest solar panel could cost you 45 Ugandan shillings. We're using your argument. We're not saying that is the correct one, but let's say 45,000 Ugandan shillings. And alive to the fact that I told you, according to you, boss, at least 41% of Ugandans earn less than $1 a day. That means they do not even make 3,690 Ugandan shillings per day, or even survive on it per day. So how are they in position to access or even buy that solar panel that costs 45 Ugandan shillings?
Okay, thank you so much, Rick, for that question. To begin with, for you to be successful, you really need to, just like the saying goes, Rome was not built in one day, so we have to go step by step.
Yeah.
And I feel like the first step is appreciating your problem and being willing
Daphine,
to come to a solution.
All right.
I am getting there. I'm getting there. So when you're willing to appreciate the solution, you've learned about your problem, you know it is bad, and now you're looking forward to having a solution.
okay.
Can I back Daphine up?
Before you go to that argument, okay, let's have you.
I want to agree with what Daphine is putting out, because we have problems, and the only things we are expecting in the long run is change. I want us to understand that the countries that we look up to today, they have had, I think, the worst experiences with climate. They have the most extreme. They experience.
Joel,
They experience
just
upcoming.
hang on there. Just hang on there. No, you shall come back. You shall come back. It's okay. I'm going to come. Let me just come. That example that you used, those countries that you're saying they experience the hardest or devastating effects of climate change, those are countries. Let's not have the conversation around climate justice. Climate justice, we as Africans, or particularly in sub-Saharan Africa, argue that we are experiencing the effects of climate change that we barely contributed to. That is why we now request for things like climate finance. That's why we need to access that money. Now, those countries that you give us as examples, that first of all, their economies are far superior than Uganda's. Besides the economies being far superior than Ugandans, they have a functional system that they can quickly respond to disaster. Your argument, you talked about being disaster ready. Are we disaster ready as a country? Definitely not. And that is why it brings back to a conversation that Daphine is having here. Vulnerable communities. She argues that the solar panels, 45,000 Ugandan shillings. And I show you that vulnerable people in Uganda are the majority. And we need to understand that climate change hits poor people hardest. And how many poor people in Uganda?
Okay, now answering Drake about vulnerability and how they are more affected by climate change. Now, first of all, even the people that are not vulnerable, what we say the advantaged community, has also not come up to appreciate the effects of climate change and probably raise a hand or the other until we can get to the common man at grassroots level. So what happens is that even the fair majority of the Ugandans that can afford renewable energy have not come up to appreciate it. They are going ahead to cut down these forests to make themselves more rich at the expense of the entire community. So what should we do for those ones? Now, clearly, it brings us to the topic, or my argument, that Ugandans can actually afford this. Even if it's at a low scale, we shall get there. But at least let us appreciate it and know that whoever can, at least have a solar panel, because it is saving you from the heavier budget that you're going to interfere with.
Can I come in one more time?
Let me just help the debate here. I want us to be pragmatic.
Please.
Pragmatic. I'm going to use this simple, basic example. Napak. You go to Napak. Or you go to a district in Arua, in West Nile, in Arua, or down there in Terego. And someone, when you visit them, what they ask you is 200 Ugandan shillings, 500 Ugandan shillings. For what? To buy basic things, because they can't afford that amount of money that you're talking about. Now, that is the vulnerable person that we're looking at, that is greatly affected by climate change, that survives on the earth, that gets the foods from the ground. The issue is, for them not understanding the devastating effects of climate change, first of all, contributes to the challenge that we're experiencing, but then two, we are still going to face climate change anyway. Now, how can we then get, first of all, that person deep down there who, first of all, can't afford that solar panel, isn't aware of these effects of climate change, to first of all appreciate the effects of climate change and come up with more proper, pragmatic solutions?
Yes, that brings me back to my previous statement. Yes, that for you to be able to outgrow a problem, you need to first appreciate it.
Yeah.
So we have a government, and a functioning government, I believe. So what the government should help us with, or what the government needs to do anyway, is first of all, they need to sensitize these people. And they are aware of their problems, regardless of the fact whether they are literate or not, but they need to understand that they are facing these problems because of climate change.
Right.
And if the situation is not saved, they are going to land into bigger impacts. So what is going to happen is that the government, like it had clearly pledged, I don't remember whether it was 2020 or something like that, they were going to provide TVs and radios and solar panels. Now they should go ahead and help these people.
Right.
Yes?
Oh, definitely. I'm just going to catch you there and bring in Vanessa. But before I catch you, I just want to pose a rhetoric. When we started the conversation,
Yes.
you said our government needs to prioritize
Yes.
climate.
Yes.
And in your last argument, you just said you believe our government is capable enough to do what is right in terms of providing solutions.
Yes.
That is contradictory in nature. But
No,
it
no,
holds
no.
you there and bring, and bring in Vanessa. Yes, Vanessa.
Yes, so I beg to differ a little bit from what you are saying, because these people in rural communities, they have the indigenous knowledge. They have a way they be doing things, and they have a way they are adapting to the climate change. Not necessarily going into of course, renewable energy and solar panels are a plus, but for them to adapt, it needs you to first, fit into their community and know exactly what to do for them. Solar panels might be an alternative, but it might be not an alternative for them. So you have to sit down, or someone has to actually go on ground and actually see how these people live their lives, what they can do, what is the best solution. Like, I saw a quote by some Kenyan man, it's called Ledama. He said, climate change conferences should actually be held in a desert to know that climate change is real and to come up with the practicable solutions, yeah? Because last year, I went to Karamoja. So Karamoja is facing drought, and we seemed to know the solution. So they brought for these people dams, valley dams, yeah? And these people say they don't want. They don't want. So you see, you have to first, live in a community to know what exact solution to offer. Because even they banned charcoal, but people are still using charcoal, a lot of people, and it's those people in rural communities that are actually selling the charcoal. So now, if you tell them to stop producing and cutting down trees for the charcoal, it's their source of income. So that's why they are bringing in this aspect of going to teach them about making briquettes, making an alternative for the charcoal. Because they feel like they won't stop doing that because they're gaining from it. So even incentivizing these different solutions can also be an alternative.
Okay. Now, the irony is, however much you think these people are unable, which we want to appreciate, all of us, is that the amount of money they are going to spend per year from that firewood, from that timber that they are using to make charcoal, is more expensive, or can buy even 12 solar panels.
But
remember, they are near these
resources.
They have the trees.
Yeah, it is what is available. Yes, I get where you're coming from. It is what is available, and also it is what they know. I mean, what am I supposed to do? They don't even know how to use solar panels. They don't know how they
But
operate.
rather, they are not spending to use these trees, but they are gaining from it.
Can I get in there?
No, let me first and build on my argument. So I want to say, however much these people are illiterate, even when we want them to appreciate renewable sources of energy, we clearly know at the back of our minds that they don't know what to do. They don't know how to use them and everything that comes with it. And that is why they think they are expensive than the trees they are cutting per day. So on the land that you use to plant those trees, do you know how much firewood is, by the way? That's the amount of firewood you can use in a year.
But Daphine,
First get to think of that.
just one question. Just one question alone. How practical is your solution?
How practical is my solution is that, first of all, let us appreciate that it is a solution.
No,
Don't be biased.
no.
Renewable
What is
sources
okay?
of
Let
energy
me
is a solution.
let me just rephrase.
Okay, what's your solution? If it's not renewable.
We haven't refused renewable energy. That is a very perfect solution. But the question is, how practical is that solution?
Exactly.
Considering our context, understanding what she just told you.
Okay.
A community that you take to them, a solution, thinking on their behalf that is the best fit for you, and in the end of the day, they don't want.
Okay, when we were starting this debate, I told you that the how aspect is what is lacking. Leave alone renewable. Even in planting trees, even in, like, we learn the things in class, but implementing them is where the problem is. So I would say the majority of the Ugandans, I beg to retract the statement if it is not polite enough, are just stubborn to appreciate these things or even practice them. So now, when we appreciate that renewable sources of energy are the solutions, we will go a step ahead. It is not an easy fight. But remember, we want to fight the effects of climate change, which is a long-term effect, even on our great-grandchildren, if we do not solve it today. Just like education and all the other women injustices and everything that was happening in the 80s, and how we got to struggle to fight them is the same way. It is the same struggle that we are going to go through to endeavor that each Ugandan appreciates, even if you don't afford, but first appreciate that you need a solar panel. And it is less expensive than using firewood an entire year.
Okay, but the question was still... Joe, you have something to say.
Like, I wanted to come in the part that was talking about, she was talking about use of firewood and so on. But like I earlier on, like put it out that Uganda loses around 100,000 hectares of land every year due to cutting out of trees. And this could be to use the firewood, like she said. But I want us again to appreciate, there's something that happened in Dutch, if you heard about the Dutch disease, whereby one sector was crippling the other sectors. So here, if you appreciate that industrialization would be the best way we can get into the middle income status, being a middle income status economy as the dream of this country is, then we are going to risk degrading the environment. And in the right sense, we are going to understand that what Daphine was trying to point out is appreciating our problem we have at hand. Then in the long run, we create solutions. The practicability of the solution there is now what becomes the question. Because you asked what's the practicability of what? The idea of, because I noticed when you're speaking, you're coming from a school of thought that believes that America is the world's most polluting what? Economy, definitely, which is true. But then can't we differ from them in the kind of solutions we're going to create? How about the applicability of the biodiversity we have at hand? Instead of looking at solar alone, why can't we recycle the use of our livestock, the wastes of our livestock, and put into use, and we have things like biogas and so on?
All those are very good solutions, but now it will come down to one thing. One, the political will to ensure that this happens. But besides the political will to ensure this happens, we need to have people knowledgeable, climate knowledgeable about all these issues. And that is only possible if the government is willing, first of all, to inject money to make people understand. But in the short run, what can students do differently? That is why you're here.
Okay.
Educate.
Okay, to begin with, what a student can do or what the youth can do.
Yeah.
First of all, clearly the youth are more learned. That means they know about these things. Or if they don't know, then they should know. So when a youth knows, for example, when I learn about the problems and the solution and the possible solutions. Yeah. Now, coming to renewable again, now like biogas, the people of Karamoja have appreciated clearly on a large scale animal growing. They have cattle, they have goats and whatnot. So it only takes an interested youth, it only takes a passionate youth to go and educate these people. Clearly the government probably will come in or should come in, but even us as the youth, if my society has taken me to school, then they expect me to give back. So the only way that I can give back, even in my small capacity, is sharing with my natives what I've learned from school. And bearing in mind that the resources are already there. They just need to be enhanced. And we have these solutions working. So what is going to happen is that you go and educate the people of Karamoja about how biogas operates. They already have the resources. And then that is how we start asking for funds to make it practical. Yeah.
All right. Joe,
Please.
what can we do differently?
Talking about the youth's responsibility and what they can do differently, it is very important to understand that our society is interlinked. It's a structural arena where we are linked to understand, one, the government has something to do, the citizens have something to do, and different other stakeholders have different statements to make. So I would love to come and say the youths alone can do this, but we should work though we are interconnected, then we should work as a team. It should be a social responsibility, if for the lack of a better word, it should be social responsibility for the youths, the government, and the other stakeholders to put in place solutions that come with climate change, solutions to problems that come with climate change.
Vanessa, what can we do differently?
Yes, so as youth, I personally think that as us, we can start individually. Make sure we don't litter. Make sure we are telling our friends about different climate change aspects, advocacy. Advocacy goes a long way because, as youth, most of us are not financially able. So advocacy, we can advocate on social media because most of us youth are on social media, so we can do advocacy. It goes a long way. We can talk about it. We can make campaigns about it to inform other youth that, look, this is a problem we are facing and we have to deal with it. And we have to actually bring up change. We can try to put ourselves in a situation or a place where we can be in spaces to talk about these things. Because most of the people and most of the spaces that talk about these things are elderly people. And they will talk about it, but they won't do much action about it because their time is now, ours is later. And it's us who have to realize, come sit down and be in these spaces, push ourselves to be in these spaces, get access to these spaces so that we as youth can rise up and actually talk, actually do things, go to the ground roots. Yes, basically that's what I feel.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, also, benchmarking with Rwanda. Let our policy be a policy.
Yeah.
So when Uganda is coming up with policies against climate change, then let them be policies. In Rwanda, there are days for cleaning their environment. And no cars are in movement. There is no movement. Clearly that day is for cleaning. I think it is either from, morning to 2 p.m. or something like that. They will stop everything and clean their environment. In Rwanda, you cannot throw a paper, you cannot litter, you cannot do those stubborn activities. Yeah, so let a policy be a policy, and whoever goes against the policy, now let the law take action. But also as youth, just like I said, some of these things, when you get to appreciate them right from childhood, then they become part of you. Naturally, no flex, they are part of you. So when the youth are giving birth, then interest your children with these things early enough so that they grow up knowing that there is climate change and they should, take action even at a young age. And just like I said, the youth should go back to give to communities.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just before we edge towards the end of the conversation, I'm greatly interested in us, first of all, tackling just one aspect of the conversation which all of you greatly highlighted on. And Joel, you talked about disaster ready. And I just feel like if we don't mention the issue of being disaster ready or disaster prepared, definitely we are still going to lose very many more people. We saw how many lives we lost in the Chitezi incident because of lack of disaster preparedness. and yet we have an entire ministry that is in charge of being disaster ready. So what must the government do to ensure that we are disaster ready? Because climate change is here, and it is coming with numerous effects and alarming effects.
Thank you so much, Drake. Understanding where we're coming from in the long tail of history, we are a country that is struggling with poverty, and we're trying to leave that state, and we are growing up in the economy. Being disaster ready, looking at their policies that have been enacted and over again, we have so many policies, we have so many acts in the Constitution, like the one I just highlighted about the impact assessment. It is not realistic, but we are living in a day and era where a constitution is put in place and it has all the blueprint of what should be done, but people are going to abuse it, and no one's going to be taken anywhere. So I would say the constitution is facade, because if we cannot actually take the constitution the way it is, legitimately the way Rwanda is doing, then we are bound to make more policies and make more others on top of those, because you realize that this is a country where there are so many policies that are actually similar. You realize that we take in another policy without chewing the previous one. So the most important thing is that as we are creating policies, the groundwork should be done. The implementing bodies, like the way the Rwandans are doing, if it is cleaning, let's do the cleaning. If it's about protection, that talk about we are conserving the environment, we are planting trees, let it be a social responsibility with the implementations in place. That's what I would perceive as the right thing to do as far as annihilating this whole drastic changes of environment and climate is concerned.
All right. Daphine, as well, in your opening or in your precursor, you mentioned that government needs to prioritize. So maybe as we also edge towards the end of the conversation, a message to the government.
Okay. First of all, getting to disaster preparedness. Weather forecasts should be made so that you know that in 2 years, in 3 years, in 6 months, this is going to happen in this particular place. So that also helps people to be aware. And if it is a displacement that should be made, then it is made. And that is the role of the government, because clearly you cannot put that burden on individuals who don't even practically have these resources to ensure that that is performed. So the government should help us in a way that they should inform people of what should happen, but also people should fight for themselves, to ensure that we don't get that far. At least what we've done, let us stop there and now try to put things right, because we have the capacity. Yeah.
Thank you. Lastly, Vanessa, understanding that your message was, first of all, stemmed from the idea of climate literacy, what can the youth, young people, women do to ensure that we all get the necessary knowledge around climate literacy to ensure that we have a more sustainable world and future?
Yes. Climate knowledge is very key in our strive to drive climate action. And so as women, as youth, as everyone, how we can get to know is we can advocate, the ones who know, us who are knowledgeable about it, we can sensitize people about it, we can do drives about it, we can do campaigns, basically, and try to reach out to people who don't know. And we can also try to reach out to these people in the rural communities specifically and try to do mindset change campaigns and try to let them know what exactly is on ground, using real life examples, trying to show them different aspects of climate change. Yes, basically that's,
And your closing remarks?
my closing remarks is that climate change the time is now to actually do these things, because if we wait, we shall end up being destroyed. They say you can't do anything on a dead planet. So the time is now, and we have to realize that the effects of climate change are really severe, and it actually affects everyone. Some people think that maybe it will affect only the rural communities, or maybe it will affect people living where there's drought, people living where there is floods, but it actually affects everyone. Indirectly, directly, it affects all the sectors. So I believe our combined intervention, if we collaborate, if we come together as youth, as women, as children, we shall be able to deal with the climate change.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Joe, closing remarks?
I would say, being in a country that is struggling with climate change, let it come as a shock, the way it has always done. So the only thing we're supposed to do is to embrace the change, because we need to understand that climate has the capacity of either blowing your dreams out of proportion, or if well prepared for, can actually light more dreams. I would say to Ugandans and beyond that let's live in this world like it is the only world we have. Let's not live. Let's not live as if we have a planet B we are going to, and that actually talks about the responsibility we're supposed to do. It's the onus is on us to protect this environment. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Definitely. Daphine.
Okay, first of all, thank you so much for the opportunity to talk about climate change. So, to begin with, climate change is not just climate change, because at the end of the day, it gets to affect each and every other activity that is going to happen. So, the earlier we appreciate climate change and struggle so hard to fight it, the better, and even the easier for us to continue living the way we want to live. But also bearing in mind that over 86% of the world's population know about climate change and are willing to do whatever it takes. So we should now invest more in the how aspect and the practicability to see that whatever is in everyone's mind gets to be practiced. And I think with that, if we stop where we are now and now try to do things in a better way, we are going to get there.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Vanessa, Joel, and Daphne, for taking time to join us in this conversation. It's been quite interesting and intriguing. Personally, I've loved it. And to Civic Space TV for making this possible, Center for Constitutional Governance, the production crew, Paul, Ronald, and Brittany for making this possible. Thank you. And to you, our dear esteemed viewers, for always following. See you next week, same time, same place. Bye-bye.